The wind howled outside the saloon like a warning cry, but inside, the warmth of oil lanterns and the clink of glasses drowned it out. Claire Jennings moved with quiet precision behind the bar, pouring whiskey for a pair of miners too drunk to notice her barely concealed nerves. Her husband, Jeb, was supposed to be back in town today, and she could already feel the old tension creeping into her shoulders. It wasn't always like this. When she'd first met Jeb Jennings, he was all smiles and smooth talk, boots dusted from trail rides, but hands soft from handling money, not cattle. He'd courted her with stories of starting over, promises of land, family, peace. Claire had been orphaned young and passed between distant relatives, never really belonging anywhere. Jeb's attention had felt like safety. That illusion had cracked a few months after they wed. She found bloodied coins hidden in the floorboards, letters from men she didn't recognize, coded with words like shipment, feds, and burn after reading. When she asked him, Jeb smiled too wide and said, "A man's got to keep some secrets." Now she was haunted by how many of those secrets she'd ignored. And tonight, one of them was about to spill out right in front of her. The saloon emptied. Early. A storm was coming, and even the gamblers knew when to retreat. Claire was finishing up for the night counting coins, wiping the bar when she heard it. A strange shuffle from the back room, followed by a muffled grunt. She froze. That door was usually locked. Only Jeb and a few of his men ever went in there. She crept closer. The murmur of voices reached her ear. 2 men, one angry, the other panicked. "You think I wouldn't find out?" The first voice hissed. It was Jeb. "Please, I did what I was told." I kept quiet. There was a sound like a bottle breaking, then a thud. Claire's breath caught. She pressed her ear to the PA. "Wood, you met with the marshal, Frank. You told him about Colorado. You told him about me." "No, Jeb, please." The next sound chilled Claire to the bone. A gunshot. She slapped her hand over her mouth to stop the scream. Her knees buckled, but she didn't fall. She stayed crouched behind the door, heart thundering. She heard Jeb curse under his breath and the metallic click of a revolver being reholstered. "You shouldn't have made me do that," he muttered. "Now look at the mess." Claire backed away slowly, trembling, but a floorboard groaned beneath her boot. Silence. Then Jeb's voice, cold and quiet. "Who's there?" She bolted. Claire burst through the swinging saloon doors and into the freezing night. Snowflakes slapped her face like sparks, but she didn't stop. She ran behind the stables, past the sheriff's dark office, and up toward the hill path behind the church. Behind her, she heard the saloon door fly open and Jeb's voice echo out, "Claire?" She didn't answer. Couldn't. Her body moved. On instinct. She grabbed the reins of the black mare tied behind the smithy Maggie, her favorite, always left saddled just in case. She mounted with shaking hands, barely getting her feet in the stirrups before kicking the horse into a gallop. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to get away before Jeb caught her, because now she knew the truth. Jeb wasn't just a criminal, he was a murderer. And worse, he was willing to kill anyone who crossed him, including her dad. As the mare pounded up the mountain trail, Claire clutched the saddle horn and tried to think. Snow blinded her, wind cut through her coat, and still she pressed on. The trail narrowed, ice crusting the edges of steep cliffs. Behind her, no hoofbeats yet, but that wouldn't last. Jeb would come for her, and not just him. His entire gang, dozens of men who owed him everything. Men who'd follow his orders without question, would be hunting her before sunrise. Claire wasn't the same girl who believed in charming smiles and whispered promises. Not anymore. As thunder rolled over the ridge and lightning split the sky, she made a silent vow. She would not be caught, and she would never go back. The storm rolled over the mountains like a beast awakened, thunder cracking the air, snow swirling like smoke. Claire leaned low over Maggie's neck, the Mare's powerful legs churning through the drifts as they climbed higher into the wilderness. The lights of the town faded behind her, swallowed by darkness and distance. She didn't know where the trail led, only that it led away. Hours passed before she dared slow. Maggie was lathered with sweat despite the cold, steam rising from her back like mist from a boiling pot. Claire guided her beneath a cluster of pines, their thick branches catching the falling snow. There, in a shallow clearing ringed by boulders, she dismounted and listened. Silence, except for the wind. No hoofbeats. No voices. She was alone, for now. Claire dropped to her knees, her legs shaking from the ride. She'd barely taken anything when she fled. Her coat, thin and worn, a half-full canteen, a wrapped biscuit she'd stuffed into her apron, and a rolled scrap of paper she'd hidden long ago under a drawer in the saloon just in case. She unrolled it now with numb fingers. It was a hand-drawn map, crude but familiar. She'd sketched it herself during the quiet months marking rivers, canyons, mining camps, and trails she overheard the gamblers and bounty hunters talk about. It wasn't much, but it was better than wandering blind. Her finger landed on a jagged mountain ridge above Elk Valley. If she could make it there, she might find an abandoned trapper's cabin. They said an old war veteran lived out that way, a man who wanted nothing to do with towns or trouble. Trouble was all she had now. She pulled her coat tighter, whispering soft praise to Maggie before remounting. The Mare's breath steamed in. The cold. They pushed onward into the trees, moving slowly now, cautiously. Every snapped twig echoed like a warning. By the time the sun threatened the horizon, Claire's fingers were frozen raw and her mind blurred with fatigue. But something in her gut said she couldn't stop. Not yet. She crossed a frozen creek where the ice cracked beneath the Mare's hooves, climbed a ridge that nearly sent her sliding backward, and ducked beneath branches that clawed at her like angry hands. With every step, she felt the weight of what she'd seen and what she was running from. Jeb had killed a man. That much was clear, but the bigger question haunted her. Why? Frank wasn't just some drifter. She'd recognized him. He'd been in the saloon once before, talking quietly with a stranger who looked far too clean-cut for that town. Claire remembered catching a glimpse of a badge on his belt when he leaned over the bar. A federal marshal, most likely. That would make Frank an informant. Now, he was dead, which meant whatever Jeb was mixed up in wasn't just petty smuggling or gambling. It was federal level. Something bigger. More dangerous. And she had seen too much. The sound of a far-off whistle pierced the silence. Claire froze. It wasn't the wind. It was a man's whistle, sharp and deliberate. A signal. She wheeled Maggie off the trail and into the deeper woods, guiding the horse into a ravine where the trees grew thick and low. They moved without sound now, picking their way over mossy rocks and between skeletal trunks. Another whistle closer this time. Claire's heart thudded. Jeb was already hunting her, and he wasn't alone. Near dusk, Claire found a narrow cleft in the cliffside, a shallow cave, barely big enough for her and Maggie to squeeze into, but sheltered from the wind. She unsaddled the Mare, wrapped her coat tighter, and pressed her back against the stone. Her breath came in small, painful clouds. She couldn't run forever. She needed rest. A fire, a plan. But most of all, she needed to find someone, anyone, who didn't know Jeb Jennings, who wouldn't turn her in for coin. Someone who might believe that the outlaw's pretty little wife was not what she seemed. As darkness crept across the sky, Claire clutched the map to her chest, her fingers tracing the path toward the Elk Valley. She whispered to herself, not to pray but to stay awake, just a little farther. Don't quit now, because if she stopped, Jeb would find her, and this time he wouldn't let her live. At dawn, the world looked like it had been scrubbed clean by snowfall. The storm had passed, leaving behind a hush that settled deep in the bones. Claire watched the horizon from the mouth of the cave, her knees drawn to her chest, her coat barely holding in what little warmth she had. Maggie stood nearby, eyes half-lidded, steam rising from her flanks. They had survived the night, but Claire knew survival would mean nothing if Jeb found her. Or worse, if someone else found her first. Someone working for him. By mid-morning, she mounted again and followed a faint game trail north, sticking close to the map she'd drawn from memory. It led toward a mining camp she'd heard about. Deacons Hollow. The miners were tough, most of them drifters with no allegiance to anyone. If she could trade her horse for a mule and supplies, she could make it deeper into the wilderness, maybe even cross into the Canadian borderlands if it came to that. But as she approached the outskirts of the camp, something stopped her cold. A poster, tacked to a tree, weathered, fresh ink, rough paper. Her face. Wanted Claire Jennings. $500 reward. Delivered alive. Do not harm. She stared at it in disbelief, her breath catching in her throat. The drawing was rough, but recognizable. Dark hair, solemn eyes, high cheekbones. Her name written bold across the top. Below it, in slanted script, guilty of aiding federal informants, fugitive, known to be armed and dangerous. Claire tore it down and crumpled it in her fists. Her hands were shaking, not just from fear, but rage. He'd made her the villain. Jeb had turned the story around before she even had a chance to run. To the miners, to the townsfolk, to bounty hunters riding these trails, she was now a traitor, a marked woman. And the worst part, he wanted her alive. That meant he needed something from her. She rode deeper into the camp, her hood pulled low, her voice hoarse when she asked for trail supplies. The man at the general store, a wiry fellow with crooked teeth, squinted at her, then shrugged. Either he didn't recognize her or didn't care. 10 silver for the blanket roll, and 2 for that jerky, he said, spitting in a tin. Want me to throw in flint and tinder? She nodded and counted out coins with frozen fingers. You on your own? He asked casually, bagging the goods. Claire hesitated. My husband's dead. It wasn't a lie, at least, not in her mind. As she turned to leave, she heard another voice rise nearby, half-drunken and far too familiar. I'm telling you, Jeb's gonna kill her himself. Ain't no one touches his wife but him. She turned her head slightly, just enough to glimpse 2 rough-looking men leaning against the side of the saloon. One was Pete Cargill, one of Jeb's oldest gang members, with a knife always strapped to his leg and a mouth that never knew when to close. The other was Eli Boone. She recognized him only by his scar, a jagged line across his cheek. He was younger than the others, newer to the gang, and by the way he kept glancing over his shoulder, he didn't seem settled in his role yet. 500's not bad, Eli muttered. That'd get me out of this place for good. Not if she puts a bullet in your gut first, Pete laughed. Jeb says she's smart. Snake smart. Reckon he trained her too well. Claire's stomach churned. She didn't wait to hear more. She slipped back into the woods and took the long route out of town, avoiding roads, ducking under pine branches. It was clear now. She couldn't trust anyone on this side of the mountains. The bounty wasn't just a death sentence. It was a trap. Jeb was spreading the story that she was the traitor, that she had been working with federal men. It was a clever move. If she was found and caught, no one would believe her version of the truth, not in a world where power belonged to the man, who paid more. He wanted her alive for one reason, to silence her his way down, to find out what she knew and make sure. She never told it to anyone else. That night, she made camp in a dry ravine miles from Deacon's Hollow. She didn't light a fire, didn't unpack her blanket, just leaned against a tree with her rifle in her lap and the map spread beside her, lit only by moonlight. The snow began again. But now Claire wasn't just a fugitive. She was a target. And, somewhere behind her, a dozen men with guns and greed in their eyes were coming, not just for the reward, but for her silence. Claire's breath came in short, clouded bursts as she trudged through the narrowing pass. Maggie had given out the night before too many days without proper rest or food. Claire had whispered a tearful goodbye, untied the reins, and slapped the mare's flank, sending her galloping back down the slope. Now she was alone, boots crunching, over ice-crusted brush, every limb aching from exhaustion, and cold. The map in her pocket was nearly unreadable from where. But she remembered the mark near the edge of the ridge, Trapper's Cabin, written in faint pencil. She had overheard the miners talking about it once, about a reclusive war vet who lived deep in the pines. A man who didn't ask questions, didn't speak much, and definitely didn't welcome visitors. Claire wasn't in a position to be picky. Her stomach growled. She'd been rationing dried jerky, but it had run out yesterday. Her lips were cracked, fingers stiff, and feet numb in her worn-out boots. Every breath she took now felt sharp as glass. Still, she pressed on. If Jeb's men were still looking for her, and she had no doubt they were, she needed to disappear completely. The townsfolk believed Jeb's story. The gang had her face on posters, but a ghost in the mountains? That was harder to catch. She just had to make it another mile. Maybe 2. Then she saw it. A wisp of smoke rising between the trees, thin and gray, curling into the icy sky. Not a wildfire. A chimney. She pushed forward, branches scraping her coat, snow brushing her knees. The trail narrowed until she saw a clearing, and there it was, a rough-hewn cabin tucked beneath tall pines and shadowed by the cliff wall. A lean-to stacked with firewood stood nearby. A mule was tied out front, its bray startled by her approach. Claire staggered into the clearing, legs giving out beneath her. She woke to warmth and firelight. The room was dim, lit by a single oil lamp. The cabin smelled of pine smoke and boiled coffee. A blanket was draped over her, scratchy but thick. Her boots had been removed. Her frozen socks hung near the fire to dry. She bolted upright, but immediately winced from the pain in her ribs. "Don't move too fast," a deep voice rumbled. She turned. A man stood in the corner, arms crossed, watching her. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a salt-and-pepper beard and eyes that had seen too much. He looked like someone who'd lived through wars and didn't want to live through much more. "You were half dead when I found you," he sighed. "Horse gone, boots soaked. Could have frozen out there." Claire stared at him, breathing hard. "I didn't mean to trespass. You're lucky it was me and not a bear that found you." She didn't respond. He poured her a tin cup of something hot and passed it to her. She sipped. Bitter coffee. Scalding but perfect. After a long silence, he sat across from her. "You running from someone?" he asked finally. Claire's hands tightened around the cup. "Yes." He didn't press, just nodded once. "You got a name?" "Claire." She hesitated. "Claire Jennings." That made him pause. He rubbed his chin, watching her. "There's a poster with that name tacked to a tree near the trail. Says you're wanted. Says you're dangerous." Claire swallowed hard. She could feel his eyes measuring her. "I didn't do what they said," she said softly. "They're lying." "My husband, he..." She stopped, voice cracking. "He's the one behind it all." The man studied her for a long time. Then, "People lie. Posters don't care. But my gut tells me you're more scared than dangerous." Claire looked at him, really looked. "You don't trust many people, do you?" "Nope." "Why help me?" He leaned back and sipped from his cup. "Because if I was in your boots, half dead in the snow, I'd hope someone might open there door too." That night, Claire curled up by the fire, the warmth slowly bringing sensation back to her limbs. The man he hadn't given his name slept lightly with a rifle across his lap. not out of distrust, but habit. The kind of man who expected danger at all times. She didn't blame him. As snow fell gently outside, Claire finally let her eyes close. For the first time in days, she wasn't running, but deep in her gut, she knew it wouldn't last. Jeb wouldn't stop. And soon, this cabin in the pines would become a battleground too. Claire woke before dawn to a sound that didn't belong. Not the creak of logs settling in the cold, not the snap of firewood. This was deeper, closer. A long, low growl that vibrated through the floorboards. She sat up fast, her breath already clouding in the icy air. The old man, still nameless, was already awake. He stood near the window, rifle in hand, staring out through the frosted glass. "Wolves," he muttered. "Pack of them, close." Claire crawled toward the door and peeked through the cracked timber. Shadows moved between the trees, at least 4, maybe 5, big ones, gray and lean with hunger, pacing the edges of the clearing. Maggie was gone, but the man's mule stomped nervously, yanking at its rope and snorting. "They smell blood," he said. "Or fear, maybe both." Claire's heart pounded. "Will they attack?" "Depends how hungry they are." He moved to the door and slid the bolt closed. His movements were calm, practiced. He wasn't afraid, but he was ready. Claire could feel it in the way he loaded the chamber without a word. She reached for the old pistol he'd given her the night before. It was heavy, cold, and awkward in her grip, but it was something. They waited, side by side, watching through the cracks in the logs. For a long time, nothing happened. Then one of the wolves stepped into the clearing, bold, limping slightly. It sniffed the air, looked directly at the cabin. Warning shot cracked through the stillness. The old man fired into the snowbank just ahead of the animal. The wolf jumped back but didn't run. It stood its ground, yellow eyes glowing in the early morning gray. "They're not afraid," Claire whispered. "They will be," he said, and opened the door. The cold slapped them both as he stepped out onto the porch. Claire followed, pistol raised, her hands trembling from more than just cold. Another wolf emerged from the trees. Then another. The pack circled the clearing, low to the ground, tails twitching. The mule brayed in panic, tugging so hard it nearly broke free. "They'll go for him first," the old man said. "But if they get desperate—" He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't have to. They waited in silence until the first wolf lunged. The old man fired once clean, fast. The wolf dropped mid-leap, skidding through the snow. That broke the tension. The rest scattered, yelping into the trees. The leader, the limper, paused only for a heartbeat before vanishing like smoke. Claire lowered the pistol. Her arms ached from the tension. "You ever kill a man?" The old man asked without turning. She flinched. "No, you might have to soon." "If it's you or them, don't think. Just pull the trigger." Claire nodded slowly, though the truth swirled in. Her stomach like sickness. She didn't want to kill anyone. But she knew deep down that this was only the beginning. Later that morning, they butchered the wolf's body for meat and burned what they didn't use. The scent of blood carried far, and it brought something worse. Just after midday, while Claire gathered firewood, she heard it again. Voices. She dropped behind a snow-covered log, heart hammering. The trees masked the sound, but not entirely. Men, 3 at least, laughing, muttering. One of them whistled low and sharp, a signal. Claire scrambled back toward the cabin, but the old man was already waiting at the tree line. He held up a hand, gesturing for silence. He pointed to the south ridge. Claire followed his gaze. There, barely visible through the trees, was a man on horseback. He rode slow and deliberate, scanning the ground. His hat was pulled low, a scarf covering his face, but she'd recognize that coat anywhere. Pete Cargill, Jeb's enforcer. And if Pete was here, The others weren't far behind. The old man swore under his breath. "They're tracking you." "And they're good," Claire gritted her teeth. "They want me alive. Then they'll play dirty. Corner you. Wait you out." "I can't lead them here," she said. "I have to leave." "You leave now, you'll freeze or get flanked. They've got more men than you've got bullets." He turned toward the cabin. Time to set a trap. That night, as snow fell quietly once again, Claire helped rig snares and false trails. The old man coated pine branches with ash to hide their scent. Claire dug a pitfall near the east slope. They worked in silence, only nodding when plans were understood. By nightfall, she stood on the roof of the cabin, rifle in hand, eyes sweeping the trees. Below, wolves howled again, but this time they weren't the most dangerous things in the forest. Jeb's men were here, and they were closing in. Claire lay belly down on the roof of the cabin, her breath slow, eyes trained down the barrel of the rifle the old man had given her. Her body ached from the cold, from fatigue, but her mind had sharpened to a dangerous edge. Below her, the forest held its breath. Nothing moved, not yet. The traps were set. The snares hung like spiderwebs in the underbrush. The old man had reinforced the cabin door, barricaded the windows, and hidden a second rifle just beneath the floorboards. Every boot print Claire left had been covered. Every spark of fire had been snuffed. They were ghosts now waiting in silence for the living to come crashing in, and crash they did. Just after midnight, a figure moved along the tree line, cautious, cloaked in snow mist but visible enough in the moonlight. Claire's heart stuttered. Another man crept up behind him. Then another. 3, 4, 5. They moved like predators, but they weren't as quiet as they thought. The old man stood at the back of the cabin, hidden in shadow. Claire watched him hold up 3 fingers. Then he nodded once and disappeared from sight. It was her turn now. She waited. The men moved closer, whispering. Claire could only catch pieces. "She's in there. Jeb wants her brought in alive. Kill the old man if you see him." She didn't hesitate. Crack. The first shot dropped the lead. Scout where he stood. Panic exploded through the group. They dove for cover, shouting over one another. Claire rolled to the left side of the roof, took aim again. Crack. A second man stumbled back, hit in the leg, howling. That was enough. The gang retreated into the trees, at least temporarily. But she knew it wouldn't be over. Inside the cabin, the old man met her with a grim smile. "You shoot better than most cowhands I've seen," he said. Claire exhaled hard, lowering the rifle. "Jeb taught me." His smile faded. "Then it's time to use everything he taught you, and turn it against him." The next morning, Claire and the old man scouted the edge of the ridge. Looking for signs the gang had regrouped, they found blood. In the snow, drag marks, a broken compass. One man's saddlebag had been torn open, leaving behind a crumpled letter and Claire's name written across the page. It was a bounty list. Hers at the top. Below that, a note in Jeb's hand. "No injuries, no stories. Bring her back clean. Dead men tell no tales." Claire stared at the handwriting. Something deep in her snapped. She'd spent the last week running, hiding, surviving. Now it was time to take the fight to him. She turned to the old man. "I want to know everything. How to move through woods without being seen. How to bait a trap. How to track men who think they're the ones hunting." He studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "All right then," he said. "Let's make a hunter out of you." The days that followed hardened Claire into someone she no longer recognized, but someone she respected. She learned how to mask her scent using pine and ash, how to blend with the trees, even when the snow fell thick. She practiced with the rifle until she could hit a rabbit at 40 yards. She set traps, dug hides, watched the ridges for smoke signals and bird flights that gave away movement. One morning, she found one of Jeb's men separated from the others, young, nervous, looking lost. She trailed him quietly, watched him build a small fire and try to warm his hands. His boots were too big, his gloves mismatched. He didn't look like a killer. Claire stepped out of the trees, rifle pointed. "Drop your weapon." He flinched. Dropped it fast. "I'm not here to hurt you," she said. "But if you lie to me, I'll bury you right where you sit." He nodded quickly. "I ain't gonna lie." "Why's Jeb really want me alive?" The boy hesitated. "Because," he swallowed, "you know about the marshal. The gold he stole. You were there when he killed that informant. He's scared you'll tell the law. He wants to shut you up before you make it to a town that matters." Claire's lips tightened. "Where is he?" The boy's eyes widened. "You're not thinking of going after him?" "I'm done running," she said. "He started this. I'm going to end it." By sunset, Claire had everything she needed. A location, a path, a reason. The old man stood at the door, arms crossed. "You sure you want to do this?" he asked. Claire nodded, rifle slung over her shoulder. "I'm not his prey anymore," she said. "I'm his reckoning." And with that, she vanished into the trees. No longer the hunted. Now the hunter. The wind had shifted. Claire could feel it cold, dry, laced with the faint scent of smoke. She moved silently along the ridge. Her boots softened with burlap to muffle sound. Every step was placed with care, every breath measured. She had left the cabin at first light, armed with a pack of dried meat, a skin of water, and the name of a mining town whispered by the frightened gang member she'd cornered 2 nights before, Red Bluff. Jeb had been spotted there. It wasn't much a half dead. Boomtown nestled in a valley riddled with abandoned gold tunnels and bad luck. But it was lawless. A place where a man like Jeb could hold court, spend stolen gold, and plan his next betrayal without fear. Claire had only one thought now. It ends where it began. By the time she reached the outskirts of Red Bluff, dusk had painted the sky a deep red, as if the land itself had bled dry. Smoke from cabin chimneys coiled into the air. Dogs barked in the distance. A church steeple stood crooked, and several storefronts leaned like they were tired of standing. She passed through the edge of town under the wide brim of a dusty hat. Face shadowed, coat drawn tight. No one looked twice. That was the secret of places like this. Everyone had something to hide. Her face, once plastered on wanted posters, now blended in among gamblers, gun runners, and grave diggers. She slipped into the back room of a barber shop where she'd arranged to meet the boy she let go. He'd agreed to help her for a price. He was already waiting, hat in hand, eyes wide with nervousness. "He's in the saloon, like I said," he whispered. "Third one down past the old mine road. Upstairs." He took over the whole top floor calls. "At his office. 2 men at the front, one on the stairwell." Claire nodded. "What about the rest of the gang?" "They're scattered. Some ran after the last ambush. He's got maybe 6 left with him. And he still thinks I'm running?" The boy hesitated. "He ain't sure anymore. He's paranoid. Sleeping with a shotgun across his lap." "Good." She gave him the rest of the coins and turned for the door. He stopped her. "You sure you can pull that trigger?" Claire looked him square in the eye. "I already have." The saloon sat crooked on the edge of town, lanterns glowing behind cracked windows, piano music warbling off-key from inside. It looked like every other watering hole in the West, but Claire knew better. This place was a throne. And Jeb Jennings was still king, at least in his mind. Claire waited until midnight. She watched from across the street, counted the guards, memorized their patterns. She moved like smoke, slipping behind the saloon through an alley, past the livery, and up a rusted iron staircase that led to the second floor. She reached the balcony window without a sound. Her fingers shook only once when she gripped the handle of the revolver. She pushed the window open and stepped into her past. Jeb was alone, slouched in a chair beside a dying fire. His boots were propped on the desk. The room smelled of whiskey, cigar smoke, and something sour beneath it all rot. He looked older, thinner, but the arrogance still clung to him like grease. "I figured it was you," he said without turning. "Pete never came back. And Eli's been jumpier than a fox in a doghouse." Claire raised the gun. He turned slowly, hands raised, a crooked smile crawling across his face. "Well, look who learned to fight. You should have killed me when you had the chance," she said. "Oh, I tried. Thought about it a dozen times. But you were always too smart, too fast, too much like me." Claire's jaw tightened. "Don't flatter yourself. You think you're better? You helped me build it. The lies, the roots, the codes. You knew about the gold. I didn't know you were killing to keep it. I killed to survive, same as you're doing now." She stepped forward. "You didn't survive. You infected everything around you. And now I'm here to cut it out." Jeb laughed once, a harsh barking sound. "You don't have the stomach." Claire fired, not to kill. The bullet hit the wall beside his head. Dust rained down. "Next one's real," she said. "Tell your men to stand down, burn the papers, then disappear. Or I drag you back to face every marshal you ever spat on." He stared at her for a long time. For a moment, Claire saw something flicker in his eyes, not fear, recognition. "You're not the girl I married." "No," she said. "I buried her in the snow." She walked out of that room with the ledgers, the map of smuggling trails, and enough gold to vanish. She didn't kill him, but she left him with nothing. And sometimes that's worse. Claire rode east under a sky bruised with storm clouds, the horizon split with fading light. The trail she followed led to a place marked only once on her old, hand-drawn map: Redemption, a small mining town tucked into a mountain basin where no law had ruled for years, but where miners, widows, and railroad men still tried to start. It wasn't a place people went to be found. That's why she chose it. The weight of the leather satchel pressed against her side inside, the ledger she'd stolen from Jeb's desk, a list of names, dates, and transactions that proved everything: the bribes, the smuggling routes, the marshal's murder. It was more than evidence. It was leverage. The town of Redemption appeared like a bruise in the rocks, half built, half broken. Most buildings leaned against each other for support. Tents lined the street where wooden walls had yet to be raised. But what it lacked in polish, it made up for in something else: people who minded their own business. Claire stabled her horse near the mining office and walked into town. Hat pulled low, eyes followed her, but no one asked questions. She liked that. Her destination was a saloon called the Pickaxe, a lopsided two-story place with broken piano keys and a bar made from an old mine cart. Rumor had it a former Pinkerton ran it now. After quitting the badge and disappearing into the hills, if anyone could get these documents into the right hands, it would be him. She stepped inside, letting the warmth hit her like a slap. The smell of old whiskey, coal soot, and tobacco filled the room. Rough men played cards at two tables. A woman sang softly in the corner, and behind the bar stood a tall, broad man with a noticeable limp. "Name's Silas," he said without looking up. "You here to gamble or run?" "Neither," Claire said, placing the satchel on the bar. "I came to burn something down. Thought you might be able to help." That got his attention. In the back room, she laid out the ledgers. Silas flipped through them slowly, his eyes narrowing with each page. "Jennings," he muttered. "Been hearing his name for years. Could never pin him to anything." "I can," Claire said. "He killed a federal informant, framed me, sent his gang to bring me in, alive, And you outlived them? She met his gaze. I outsmarted them. Silas leaned back, exhaling. You could sell this for 10,000 to the right bounty. Hunter. Twice that to the wrong one. I don't want money, Claire said. I want this gone. I want Jeb's web torn down. No more gangs. No more bribes. No more bodies showing up in rivers. Silas nodded slowly. You got grit, Miss Jennings. She flinched at the name. Not anymore. Over the next 2 days, word spread. Claire stayed in a rented room above the general store, watching from the window as riders came and went scouts. Couriers, a quiet man in a long coat who asked no questions and left with a bundle of papers hidden under his arm. Silas worked fast. By the third day, Redemption buzzed with tension. Men who once worked for Jeb tried to slip away unnoticed. 2 were arrested on the road to Fort Breaker, intercepted by a marshal Claire had never met, but whose badge gleamed like justice she thought no longer existed. Her name had been scrubbed from bounty boards. A new one took its place. Jeb Jennings, $1,000 dead or alive that night. Claire stood at the edge of the mining ridge, staring down at the flickering lights of Redemption. The wind whipped her coat behind her. For the first time in weeks, there were no voices chasing her through the trees. No posters nailed to trees. No lies following her shadow. Silas joined her, lighting a cigar. You think this ends it? He asked. No, she said. But it ends his story. The rest of mine, I'll write it myself. Silas smiled. You ever think about staying put? Redemption's not a bad place to disappear. Claire looked out over the valley, jaw set. I didn't come to disappear. I came to become. The next morning, she saddled her horse again. Jeb was still out there alone, desperate and burning bridges faster than he could build them. But Claire knew his world was collapsing, and when it did, she'd be ready, not as his wife, not as his prey, but as the woman who ended him. Claire left Redemption before sunrise, her saddle heavy with ammunition, jerky, and a folded-up bounty notice bearing Jeb's face. She wasn't running anymore. She was riding into it. Word had come from Silas late the night before. Jeb Jennings had holed up in a box canyon 2 days west of Redemption. Isolated, remote. He had 3 men left. Maybe 4. No more allies. No more lawmen in his pocket. The world had caught up with him, and Claire would be the one to close the chapter. The ride was long and brutal. The wind was sharp and the terrain unforgiving. Narrow switchbacks, loose shale, and cliffs that threatened to swallow her with every misstep. But she rode steady. Every thump of the hooves beneath her stirred memories she had long buried. Jeb had promised her safety, promised her a future. And instead, he'd made her a witness to a murder and the scapegoat for his sins. No more running. No more hiding. This time, she would end it. By the time she reached the outer edge of the canyon, the sun was sinking low. Shadows stretched like claws across the rocks. She dismounted and led her horse behind a craggy outcrop, tying the reins beneath a juniper tree. From here, she would go on foot. She moved low, crawling between rocks and brush, her rifle strapped to her back and the revolver tight in her hand. Then she heard them. Voices, male, tired. One of them coughing, hard, wet, and ragged. Claire crept closer, flattening herself against the slope. Below, nestled between boulders and makeshift tarps, was a small camp. 3 figures were visible, one tending a fire, one sharpening a knife, and one taller, broader, standing with his back to her, staring out into the fading light. Jeb. Even from behind, she recognized him. The way he stood, the tilt of his head, the calm in his posture, as if the world was still his. Claire took a slow breath. Then she stepped out from cover and aimed. Don't move, she said loud and clear. All 3 men jumped. One went for his gun. Claire fired once, crack, and he dropped, screaming, A bullet lodged in his shoulder. The second man ran. She let him. And Jeb? He didn't move. Not at first. Then he turned slow, deliberate, and smiled. I was wondering when you'd come. Claire kept her sights trained on his chest. Your men are gone. Your cover's blown. There's a price on your head higher than you ever were. He laughed. You never understood. I built something. I kept people fed. I kept you safe. You built a lie. I built an empire, he said, stepping forward. And you were supposed to be beside me, not against me. Then why did you send men to bring me in like an animal? His voice dropped. Because I knew if you lived, you'd come back. Claire's hands didn't shake. You're right, she said. I'm here. He moved fast, lunging. She fired. The first shot clipped his side. The second missed. He tackled her, sending both of them rolling into the dirt, dust choking the air. Her pistol flew from her grip, sliding under a rock. Jeb pinned her, his hands around her throat. You could have been queen of this mountain, he growled. Claire gritted her teeth, reached into her coat, and yanked out the small skinning knife. Silas had given her. Jeb cried out, his grip loosening. She kicked him off, grabbed a rock, and slammed it into his temple twice. He collapsed, groaning, bleeding. Claire stood over him, chest heaving. He was alive, but barely. And now, the choice was hers. The law would take weeks to reach this canyon. She could walk away, let the wilderness swallow him whole, or she could end it now. But something in her paused. Killing him wouldn't clean the blood from her hands. It wouldn't erase the fear or the scars or the months spent running through snow and shadows. Justice? Justice would. The next morning she rode out of the canyon with Jeb tied to the mule behind her, unconscious but breathing. His wound had been wrapped, but barely. She'd left a note in his pocket, alive, so the world sees what you really are. Redemption lay ahead, and with it, the beginning of her true story, one not written in fear, but in fire and resolve. Claire entered redemption at noon, the sky clear and unforgiving, the wind stirring dust down the main street like ghosts refusing to rest. Behind her, Jeb Jennings slumped against the mule, bound, bruised, and broken, his hands tied, mouth gagged, one eye swollen shut. The townsfolk came out of storefronts and saloons, jaws slack, eyes wide. No one needed a name to know who he was. Justice had just ridden into town. At the steps of the jailhouse, Silas waited with two marshals beside him, one local, one federal, their badges gleaming like polished truth. He raised his brow as Claire dismounted and yanked Jeb down like a sack of grain. You did it, Silas said, more like a fact than a question. Claire nodded, her face unreadable. He's yours now. The federal marshal stepped forward, checked the bindings, then turned to her. You brought him in alive. That's rare. He doesn't get to vanish into legend, Claire said. He gets to face every lie, every law he broke, in chains. The marshal nodded. There's a reward. 5,000, if you want it. Claire shook her head. Use it to pay the widows he made. Later that day, Jeb sat in a cell silent, his eyes fixed on the stone wall like he could still control something just by staring it down. But he was no longer feared. He was no longer the man that West whispered about. He was just another outlaw behind iron bars, and Claire? Claire was finally free. The next week passed like a dream she wasn't sure she trusted. She stayed in redemption, helping the local law comb through the ledgers, pointing out names and locations. Every day, another man from Jeb's gang was arrested. A corrupt sheriff from Two Forks, a banker in Dead Ridge, even a judge from Pecan Springs. The web unraveled, and Claire helped pull every thread. The town had started to change too. Fewer guns, more fences. A schoolhouse opened on the hill, and a church bell rang again after years of silence. Claire didn't pretend it was perfect, but it was no longer ruled by fear, and that mattered. One morning, Silas found her near the edge of town, standing beneath a cedar tree, hands tucked in her coat. "You could leave," he said. "Head east. Start over." Claire looked out over the valley. "I don't want to start over." "Then what?" "I want to keep going. I want to live, not hide. I want to walk into a room and not wonder who recognizes me from a poster." Silas nodded. "You've earned that." She gave a faint smile. "Maybe someday folks will talk about me for something other than who I married. They already do." 3 weeks later, Claire packed her saddle and strapped a worn journal to the back of her gear. Inside it were pages of names, dates, trails, and truths she never got to speak aloud. Her record of what really happened, not the lies Jeb spread, not the stories twisted in saloons. Hers. Before she left, she visited the jail one last time. Jeb looked smaller behind the bars, like a shadow fading at dusk. "You came to gloat?" he rasped. Claire shook her head. "I came to say goodbye," he sneered. "You think you've won? You think they'll remember you?" She looked him straight in the eye. "I don't care if they remember me." She stepped closer, voice low and even. "I remember me." That evening, she rode out of redemption with the sun at her back. No posse chased her. No wanted posters nailed to trees. The wind was clean, the trail open. She had no husband, no bounty, no master. Only the horizon. And her name. Claire. The woman who survived, the woman who chose to live, the woman who refused to disappear.